Tens of millions of families with Alzheimer's disease and dementia all over the world, including our family. We are Alz In The Fam. I'm Allan Fair.
And I'm Poli Fair Noise. We're siblings, we are parents, but we're also caregivers.
This is our podcast. This is our support group. Welcome to our family. Alzheimer's sucks, but this family lives, laughs, and learns as we fight for a cure. Welcome. Hey everyone.
Hey,
Hi.
Welcome to Alz In The Fam. Today we're going to talk about caregivers. Four of us are caregivers giving advice to other caregivers. Poli, what do you want to say about it?
Yeah, so my favorite piece of caregiving advice is to use music to change the mood. I think a lot of people with Alzheimer's, everyone gets frustrated or angry, confused. And for me, what I've found really helps with my mom is, or our mom, is always having a playlist available. I've set up a playlist on Spotify of songs she loves. I know others have just a favorite radio station. And, mom gets really upset and worried sometimes and wants to go home by herself and doesn't understand. And I can put on some songs and it takes, a minute or two, but it changes her mood, makes her feel good because she interestingly remembers the words to all the songs. So that's kind of fun to see as well. And we share that together. It helps me too, helps my mood.
Kind of a proven technique too. You read so much about that, the relationship of music and memory, and there's all these wonderful studies being done by a lot of reputable institutions on it. I see a lot in my father-in-law as well as our mom. If the mood is a little dour, we can just have Alexa play some Frank Sinatra, and if we're enthusiastic about it, it changes the mood right away. Thank God for that. I mean, because it's such an easy one.
It is. And I wanted
Some
to point out, I
Carpenters.
found this great,
Neil
study.
Diamond.
Bonnie, I'm sorry.
That's what I was going to
No,
say, Bonnie.
Neil Diamond. Yeah.
Neil
Yeah.
Diamond. It's got.
I was going to say when when I get old and have Alzheimer's, which I probably will, but hopefully not, they're going to have to play Neil Diamond for me too, because I grew up on it and now I listen to it all the time still, especially with mom.
Yeah. It's fun for me. I play songs that I remember mom singing in the car with me. So she, I don't know. There's a Nancy Sinatra song, "These Boots Are Made for Walking." It's pretty famous. And she loves that song, puts her in a good mood every time. So me too. Anyway, I did want to point out, I found this study, an NIH study, where they looked at using music in people with Alzheimer's, and in their conclusion, and we'll post the study on our show notes, that music can be considered less harmful than pharmacological interventions to improve cognitive function, mood, and quality of life in Alzheimer's patients, which is great because, who wants to give them a tranquilizer or something like that when you could just play some good music?
Absolutely. Music is a great one. How about you, Bonnie? What's a caregiver tip that you want to share?
So I think there's a couple things that are super important. One is, of course, having your own support group in your family and your immediate family. And we're lucky enough to have each other as well, so that, we're not feeling like we're all alone or feeling guilty or anything like that, having somebody to de-stress with. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about is having activities that are progression and having something where your loved one can feel useful. So I know when we were at my house, when my mom would be standing around, she wouldn't necessarily understand what was going on, even if it was just for a short period of time. So we would give her an activity, like she loved to sweep my front porch. It made her be outside. It had a start and a finish, and she felt very useful. She liked to be outside, and it kind of gave me a little bit of a break, even if it was just a 10-minute activity where I knew that she was safe and doing something and felt really good about it. So it's much easier when there's a progression. So if you contrast that to like when we take her to get food, sometimes because elapsed time is an issue, even when you sit down, she didn't remember that we had just sat down and hadn't ordered, and would start to be uncomfortable thinking we had been there for a long time. But when you can kind of see the progression, now it's dirty, I can clean it, I can clean it, I can clean it. It gives you a little bit of a break and makes her feel happy and useful. It's great all around.
Bonnie, I had a similar thing. I used to, after I learned that from you, I would put a Swiffer cloth on my, on the little Swiffer thing, and she would Swiffer my floors for me. And our main floor kind of makes a circle, and she would just go around in a circle. And, she liked to help, and be useful. So great tip.
I realized that I haven't been in a restaurant with Mom in probably a couple years, but I had forgotten about the anxiety of being in a restaurant with her, because she's constantly annoyed at the service, even though the service isn't necessarily bad.
Right. She just doesn't have elapsed time is one of the first things that starts to deteriorate. So they don't have that idea of progression. That's why doing nails versus getting hair is so much easier, because it's a process that has a start and a finish. And at any time you can see where you are, and she knows what she's supposed to be doing in the moment. And being in the car, another one is being in the car. She knows that she might not remember where she's going, but she knows she's supposed to be sitting there listening to the radio and singing.
I wonder if that is some early sign of being predisposed to Alzheimer's, because I personally love the type of cleaning where you get the instant gratification of, you see like popcorn crumbs on the carpet from the kids, the satisfaction of just one swipe of the vacuum and it's gone. I love that. Or taking
God. Come on over, please. I just put the Christmas decorations up. We've got a lot of needles. You could come over and clean up for me.
Yeah,
That's great.
Or a Clorox wipe on a counter where you can see the grease on it, makes it go away. That's good stuff. That's my kind of cleaning.
I think that's our background as makers, our evolutionary thing of wanting to be able to do something with our hands that has a result that you can see versus emails and texts and stuff like that. So, works in that.
I get back to crocheting, Bonnie.
Oh, I am actually. I've made a couple hats, and it's winter. I always hibernate by making a few scarves and hats. That's the most I can do anymore.
I always say I want to learn to do that before I get old, so that I'll have something like that to do if I can remember how to do it.
It's hard to see.
I'm constantly in these workshops where, you go around and do these icebreakers, things like, what's your spirit animal? Next time I do that, I'm going to say that my spirit animal is the Roomba. or if I could come back as an animal, what would I be? I'm going to be the autonomous vacuum cleaner.
My puppy's pretty good at cleaning up right now too. I think he ingested a lot of those needles today.
Well, back to tips for caregivers. What we've learned. I'm going to go to one about, it can be difficult to get a person with dementia to take a shower or bath to get cleaned up. They don't want to. And one thing I learned is if you make it more like a luxury spa experience for them, it can really help. So I think it's hard often for people with dementia to tell you why they don't want to do something. They can't say, well, it's cold and I'm cold, or I'm afraid, or anything like that. So, what I did was turn the heater on in the bathroom, get it really warm, then start the shower so it gets kind of steamy and warm, and towels, have everything in there, and a nice somebody else, a therapist who works with old people recommended have a really fluffy, soft bathrobe. And so that really worked for Mom. We had lotions that she really smelled like coconut, her favorite thing. So that can make it a little easier. It's not perfectly easy. There's also the risk of falls and all that you have to be concerned about, but make it a spa experience. That's mine.
If we're staying on the bath, I also want to say, I also sometimes used what I call the assumptive close, which is I would tell her, "Oh, Mom, you wanted me to remind you that you wanted to take your shower here tonight, and I have everything ready for it. Come and see, the towel's right here. Here's your makeup. Here's your things. I've turned the water on for you because remember, we're going out tomorrow." So kind of building on that is the idea that she's already agreed, and this is something that was her idea and that she wanted to do.
I think you also provided her with a handsome man named Juan as well, right, Bonnie?
That's right. I like to leave handsome men around to give us back rubs.
Sure.
I'm sure
At
she
our at our
appreciated
whim.
that. How about you,
Um,
Tracy? What's a caregiver tip that you'd like to share?
Well, we all come from a family who loves magazines and catalogs. I remember fighting with Poli and Boni over looking at a catalog that would come in the mail. And I remember Poli subscribed to 17 magazine and got very upset if anyone looked at it before her.
Still get upset.
So anyway, one of my favorite things to do still with Mom is to look at a magazine, People magazine, In Style magazine. She's really into fashion, and I can tell you that her taste has not changed a bit since she started with her Alzheimer's symptoms. She still loves the color yellow. She still will say when an outfit is, tacky or too short or too tight. So I love to sit there and look at a magazine with her. And what's great is that if she is bored with one picture, which can happen quickly if there isn't something that grabs her attention, you just turn the page and we're on to something new. And along those lines, I like just browsing shops with her, going into a clothing store, especially if we say we're shopping for my daughter, Chloe. She loves to look at clothing for her, as do I. The only problem is that sometimes I'll see something that I like for myself, and she won't want to come into a dressing room. And we have to make sure that she doesn't try to take an item, because she now sometimes thinks that she can take things, which is so unlike her. And I have found, though, the last time at least that I took her shopping near Poli's house, the shopkeepers were so nice and they recognized that, something was going on, and I really needed pants, actually. And I found a couple of pairs at this cute shop and I needed to try them on, and they were great about, kind of keeping an eye on her.
Letting her steal things and not
Yeah,
prosecuting
exactly,
her while you're in the
exactly. No, I
dressing
kinda-
room.
Well,
I just
I,
said, like, let me know if, she takes something and I'll make sure I get it back. So,
so I want to go back and talk about the magazines a little bit, because I have two subscriptions that go to Mom, that I've had a couple of over the couple of years. And so when we were selecting, Tracy, you picked one of them, which is People magazine. People magazine has a lot of pictures. It has famous people that are recognizable. And so it's enjoyable to look at, even if you're not going to be able to understand the full story. And then I also got her the National Geographic magazine, because that also has beautiful pictures. And her particular interest has always been science. She has loved science her entire life. She's a very smart woman and was very well read. So she can't read those in-depth articles necessarily or understand them, but the pictures and the headlines are very interesting to her. So, picking something that was interesting to them, but is more simplistic in terms of lots of pictures or whatever, it seemed to have worked. Our mom doesn't like children's books, I'll put it that way. So going to that style with that kind of illustration isn't necessarily the best thing for her, but those magazines that look right in her mind but have good pictures on it keep her pretty happy.
good.
yeah.
Good
Yeah.
tips.
I remember when this time of year as a kid, when I wanted her to read Nightmare, or It Was the Night Before Christmas or something like that. And she would say, "What do you want to read that crap for? Let's read the encyclopedia." I'm just kidding. That's not a true story in any way.
We did
Um,
have a whole set of encyclopedias, though. I remember that.
We did.
Sure.
The pre-internet era in the Fair household, we were pretty well stacked. If you needed to learn about Napoleon, there was some large book in the house that you could
Yeah.
reference for that.
It's true. She always loved to read, for sure.
Yeah, how boy, would she just be so fascinated by the science that's happening in the healthcare industry right now, and the vaccine for COVID, for example. Uh, Certainly that one. I suppose if she didn't have Alzheimer's, she wouldn't necessarily be tracking the research in that as well. But when you think about how crazy the world is, some of the things happening in science in the field of healthcare is some of the most exciting things happening in the world right now, bringing hope. So
Yeah.
it's a shame that she can't be there to participate and enjoy in that. I know that she'd really be into it.
Yeah,
So
she has
true.
always said that she wished she could go to the future because she's always been fascinated by advances in every category. And in particular, the brain was one of her favorite things. I remember her talking about the hippocampus and I don't even know which parts all the time. She was pretty well read on that too.
In
Yeah.
space. I remember her,
In space, yeah.
Carl
Yeah.
Sagan, right?
I
She loved his books.
Yeah, she did. It's funny. I used to a few years ago be able to put on like a good documentary for mom on Netflix or something, and she would enjoy that. But she really doesn't have
Mm-mm.
the ability. Another tip I have is to, play something on TV that is diverting but not upsetting, violent, or, has too much sex, because who wants to watch sexy shows with their children, including your children who are
Especially
middle
when
aged.
Juan's drawing that bath at Bonnie's
Exactly.
house.
Exactly. Get in the mood.
Exactly.
But I found, I don't know if you guys know this, the Carol Burnett show, there's reruns of that on, I think it's Netflix, or I don't know if it's Amazon Prime or Netflix, but those things are great. They're quick. There's no commercials when you're watching them that way. And I understand for a lot of times a caregiver is a person the same age as the person living with dementia. So that could be, Alan, your mother-in-law caring for your father-in-law. And a lot of times that generation doesn't really know how to set up the streaming service or do that. And I know that in my neighborhood, there are kids, and this may not work during COVID so well, but there are kids who are looking to get service hours for towards graduation. You have to have service, and they will go and help seniors set things like that up. And so I think, or when you're visiting your loved ones, maybe not during COVID, but set that up so they can watch shows like that. Add shows to their favorites that are appropriate. Like for us, the Carol Burnett show, but there are others as well.
We recently cut the cord with my in-laws. They had cable, and then they switched the HDMI, and they had Apple TV, and we were managing these Netflix subscriptions and different things. And suddenly it got too hard. And then, when it wouldn't work, walking them through. So one of the things we're doing this Christmas is just getting one of these all-in-one Roku TVs where we'll just add the apps to it, and it's all within the same feature and function, and we'll get them the network channels that they like just in the app version. And we think that will simplify their life and ours dramatically.
Yeah, that's
And they
amazing.
do-
That new technology is really a lot easier to manage. You plug one thing in and you can access, 3 or 4 streaming services.
Yeah, and I do think, I said this about mom. We're lucky in that as mom used a cell phone for a long time, so and a remote, so she had some familiarity with both of those things. And it's confusing, but she does have familiarity with it over the years and has not forgotten that it takes a remote to turn the TV on. I think, that's going to be the future for people as they get ill. There are also senior friendly remotes. And so they don't have all the buttons on them. We had one that came automatically with one of our TVs a long time ago. It only had on, off, and then the channel up and down. And so looking for things like that where it's and you can label then the buttons on, off, that kind of thing, so that it's very simple. I mean, we did that at the beach so that people who came to stay at the condo could learn how to use the remote, because at that point you have to turn the box on, then you got to turn the TV on, and it's got to be on input 1, and then it's got to be on channel 3, and then it's got to be on whatever it is. So simplifying that down, like you said, Alan, with the Roku and a simple remote will make things a lot easier, and then they can be a little more efficient on their own.
Right.
Roku should sponsor us.
That's what we use.
I mean, that anything that simplifies it for the person who's the caregiver, because the person living with Alzheimer's or dementia is probably not going to be able to learn even something as simple as a new Roku, maybe in the early stages, but it's certainly easier than the older setups. I wanted to move through a couple more tips real quick. A lot of times a person living with Alzheimer's, like our mom, wants to go home. Even if they're at home, they want to go home. What they really want is to go back to that place they were comfortable and they knew what to do and where everything was. And so I think it's easy as a caregiver, all of us have experienced this when we're with mom, that she's constantly asking to go home. And you can say, no, we can't go home now. You live here now, or you're doing this now. That doesn't work. And so my advice is redirect, tell them, you know what, fine. Can you go pack your bag then? Let them go pack up their bag. Or sure, why don't we sit down and have something to eat before we go? Or get your coat on, get things ready, send them off. Maybe they'll forget, rather than start a conflict with them. Another thing in a similar vein is, people with dementia who are older often have lost relatives or friends. And now with COVID, perhaps even more. When a person with Alzheimer's is asking, well, I'm fine. I want to see my friend Joan across the street, for instance. And Joan may have been dead, may have been many years, may have been recently. I've wondered when we would let mom went to a funeral, actually, remember, for Joan, her neighbor across the street, and didn't remember that Joan had died ever, probably still doesn't remember. And, I just want to say, you don't ever have to tell them why. Every time you tell them again, oh, don't you remember Joan died? It's a fresh hell for them. It's a new experience. My God, my friend died. So it's hard to lie to your mom or even your spouse, if that's the case, or whoever. But I think for caregivers out there, you need to know that you're doing what's best for them. You're saving them from some agony and despair.
Worth noting is we had multiple neighbors named Joan. So if you're one of our listeners, we're not necessarily talking about your mom, Joan, or even to you, Joan. You're still alive, and thank you for listening to Alz In The Fam.
Good point. Excellent point. That's right. We did have multiple neighbors named Joan.
I think it was one of those names. That was like the Ashley of the 40s, I guess.
The Madison, yes.
Yeah.
Jen.
So another one, it's kind of obvious. Keep doctor's appointments for yourself if you're a caregiver, right? I mean, you got to take care of yourself. And I will say, I know probably all of us have been somewhat guilty of this. We get too busy taking our kids or someone else's doctor's appointments. We don't take care of ourselves. Don't do that. Take care of yourself. You're not going to be able to, Boni, you've got something going on right now with that, I think, where a caregiver really needs to take care of themselves, or else they're not going to be able to take care of anyone.
Absolutely. My in-laws are going through that right now, and they really need to take care of each other and themselves so that they can continue to be independent.
Right. And then finally, if your loved one has a sudden change in their behavior or mood, so they're suddenly angry or doing something they don't normally do, and you have to think they're not always able to tell you what's wrong. Maybe they have a fever. You should check that out. Maybe they have, in our case, it was that mom had a urinary tract infection. She had no symptoms except she was literally running away from me. She would go in my house. I would run to try and find her, and she would see me coming and try and hide, which never happened if she didn't have a urinary tract infection. So, again, pay attention to that. If it's a new troubling thing, a dramatic change, you really have to think. Another thing that happens, mom used to really love to get together with the whole family, but we're a kind of a big boisterous bunch when it's the whole family. And mom, especially recently, has really started to withdraw from that a little bit. She'll go by herself. She'll sit there. And I think we've learned to kind of sit right next to her one-on-one and protect her for that, or even take her over to a separate room. So it's too much. It's confusing for an older person.
Well, and I found with mom, when we were going to get together, the anticipation was still there. And so her helping me to get ready, to prepare the meal and do that was a very nice afternoon for us. And then to slowly say hello to everyone and that kind of thing allowed us to have a nice day. And then she would be ready to go home because the later night was too much and the number of people was too much. But that upfront prep work again was something that she understood and enjoyed and anticipated in the way that she would have before. She could follow what was happening there, and we could have a little simple conversation about what we were working on.
Yeah. One other thing we've noticed is mom used to she might get tired at a big gathering and say, I'm going to go to sleep. I'm staying at Bonnie's house, say, I'm just going to go to sleep. She can't really do that anymore now. She's a little bit afraid. And so Bonnie and I have had the experience of kind of laying down with her to get her to be able to fall asleep. Something you might do with a toddler, maybe. Again, just a caregiving tip. Sometimes it's easier just to lay down with them to get them calmed down. Anyway.
That's sweet. I didn't know you guys had done that.
Yeah.
That is sweet.
Oh, well.
It makes me feel slightly awkward to share my caregiver tip in light of that, because that was so tender and sweet. But my caregiver tip is that it's okay to be annoyed. People with Alzheimer's and dementia are really, really annoying. And that's okay, right? Because sometimes feeling annoyed at a situation can come with guilt, and you certainly don't want to express your annoyance to the person with the disease, but you do want to have a network and support group of people that you can blow off steam with on the annoying day-to-day stuff, because they really are a big pain in the butt on a lot of the days, a lot of the times. And one of the ways in being gentle or taking time for yourself is having people that you can have those conversations with. And sometimes it's even fun to tell the stories through the lens of, being unfiltered and how you tell that story. So give yourself time and space to blow off steam about
100%.
the situation.
Caregivers need a support group. There are formal caregiver support groups. Some of them are based at like maybe a medical center or hospital. Some of them are based out of church groups. But it's worth looking into one. If you're a caregiver, staying alone in this time of COVID with someone else, maybe you can do a Zoom caregiver support group. Makes all the difference. You learn more from them, and it's other people that understand. Of course you're frustrated. Of course you're burned out. Right.
And it is not a reason to feel guilty or bad, and nobody should be judging, because it's hard. I mean, that's the bottom line. We might be telling tender stories and giving little tips, but that's because it is a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week act of love and kindness that is very frustrating, expensive, time consuming, all encompassing. So to have somebody who isn't going to try and say, oh, but they don't do it on purpose. I know it's still annoying to be told that you are wrinkled 100 times a day.
Or to not be able to have, 5 minutes to yourself. And really 5 minutes isn't enough. You need an hour to yourself. So yeah, as Allan said, you got to reach out to other people. And I would say, ask for help. Don't be that hero, brave person. I'm going to do it all by myself. Say, I can't do this. Somebody needs to help. If you have family or friends, someone, you got to do that. Also, I learned that there are these programs, they're called villages. And villages are neighborhood groups meant for people over 55 or 65 in that range. And they're all over. You have no idea. But they will do things like just make a phone call to someone. Maybe there's someone living alone with Alzheimer's and you've been constantly being everything to them. They'll reach out and call them, or they'll go by and bring a meal. They'll take them out for a walk. They're not in every neighborhood, but I'll put a link to the one in the DC metro area for people to listen to or people to look at. I'm amazed at how many there are out there that, nobody's ever told me about them before. So I hope that any one of our listeners can find one in their neighborhood. And I just want to, sometimes there are people who in your own family who are the main caregiver to someone with dementia and, or an older loved one. And maybe they don't ask for help, but there are a few things you can do to help them, some ways to reach out to them, like say, hey, I'm going to the grocery store. Do you want me to get some stuff for mom? Boni and Trissi and I and Allan to a certain extent did stuff like that. What can I do to help? Can I watch mom for you or dad so that you can go get your nails done or have 10 minutes alone? I think we all need to pay attention to caregivers because being a caregiver is profoundly isolating and devastating to the person who's the caregiver.
Yeah, Poli, I want to recognize how much of a role and just how instrumental you've been for the family. And I think birth order would be a good topic of an episode, but you really live your status as the oldest and leader among us in that. So thanks for all that you do for our mom.
I couldn't do it without you guys. Allan, but that reminds me, you were really being a hero doing all the stuff for dad when he got sick, had a stroke and was living away. We had kind of been estranged from him. But you kept up the relationship. But I want to point out, you did a really smart thing when you kind of reached out when dad it became apparent that he was going to probably need to move into a facility, couldn't really take care of himself. So I think that's a good example for other people. Allan reached out and said, does anyone want to go with me to see dad? I think we're going to move him in somewhere. Right?
Yeah, well, I think it just ladders up to asking for help when you need it is a good piece of advice. Yeah. Well, and as for a support group, I sure am grateful that the four of us have each other as our internal support group. And I know that all of you have strong friendships and others. So we're very fortunate. And for those that are not, keep listening to our podcast. We're Alz In The Fam. Nice to be with you.
Thanks for listening to Alz In The Fam. In the fight against Alzheimer's and dementia, we are all family. Find us at Alz In The Fam on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and on our website, alzinthefampodcast.com. We appreciate you clicking that subscribe button on Apple, Google, Spotify, or whatever your favorite podcast catcher may be. Alzheimer's sucks, but we are in it together. We are Alz In The Family. Talk soon.